Hi everyone, my name is Justin Burnett and I'm with the Hollywood Hills Fire Safe Council. This is a webinar presentation of the in-person presentation we did at Hollywood Presbyterian last night. A lot of people couldn't come, so we decided to make it available, of course, online for people to look at on their own. So fire will come to the Hollywood Hills. How we survive it will be determined by what we do now to prepare for it. Here's my house. My wife and I bought this house in 2014 and moved in 2015. It was the first time that I, in the then 20 years I had lived in Los Angeles, had lived in a hillside community. And we had a house right there on the ridgeline, right behind us were the canyons that lead to Canyon Drive and the Bronson Caves. And our house here is covered by beautiful, lush vegetation, like a lot of our houses are in this neighborhood. What we didn't know at the time that became a surprise to us is the first fall, we had pretty good Santa Ana winds brushing up against our house, and walking the 60 stairs up to our front door, we came to realize the Santa Ana winds were quite a force. They'd be pushing against our house at 50, 60 miles per hour, and they'd be rattling the bronze weather stripping in our windows, which made our whole house kind of hum like a harmonica. Now, this wasn't such a problem before we had kids, but in 2017 we had our firstborn, and we brought him home as a newborn, and the winds would come, because he was born in November, the winds would come and blow up against our house, and they would, of course, wake him up. And it became this huge problem. We had to tape all the windows and everything. I didn't think anything about the wind for a while until our son turned 1 and we had the Tubbs fire. And the Tubbs fire hit Sonoma County in 2017, just before his first birthday, actually. And I remember driving and listening to an NPR account of the firefighters, an interview with the firefighters talking about how incredibly difficult it was just to set up a base of operations to try and fight these fires. A lot of fire agencies came in after they found out that the fire had ignited and it was pushing rapidly due to 90-per-hour winds. And they would set a rally point about, 10, 15, 20 miles away, only to show up at that rally point to find it engulfed in flames. So this was a very rapid fire spread due to wind. And I remember all of a sudden thinking, now wait a second, we have pretty crazy winds up at our house. This is something that could happen in my neighborhood. And it's pretty crazy, but yes, it can. So if you look here, the fire takes off at 9:43 p.m. and by 3 a.m. it is all the way down in Santa Rosa. And it was a pretty extensive fire, one of the most destructive at the time when it came through. Here's some great satellite imagery of the Santa Ana winds. I really didn't understand a whole lot about them, but basically they're natural phenomenon. It's wind that pushes down from the higher elevations and pushes out to the coastline. And it's a phenomenon that happens in California and happens every fall. And, we usually get red flag days around those times, usually 4 times a year. But you can see with these satellite imagery exactly what happens. It just pushes all this usually dry, usually hot air all the way down to the ocean. This is from the Palisades fire, but you can see this animation does a really great job at kind of showing how some of those winds really work whenever they hit the topography in the mountains and the forces of how they can push through to the ocean. More diagrams on these winds. So we live in a very high fire hazard severity zone, which is a mouthful when it comes to the acronym. And this fire zone was established in '96. It was something that became California state law by Assembly Bill 337. And it's basically, they decided to start designating the places where there is high fire potentiality. And they were doing this because wildfires were within residents that had taken up, home within this wildland. They were growing. There were more and more of these wildland fires, and so they decided to designate these areas. It's also called the WUI, Wildland Urban Interface, in other circles as well, but it's the same term for both things. And you can see here in the Hollywood Hills, these areas in red are the places that are very high fire hazard severity zones. Now, how fire starts and spreads. When we live in here, it's good to understand exactly how this happens, because 84% of the wildfires in the US are started by humans or human activities. They're started by campfires, of leaving campfires unattended, equipment, sparks from equipment. We've heard of power line failures, negligence, discarded cigarettes, fireworks. And then there's, of course, arson, which is a small percentage, but it is a factor. And the things, you need three elements, of course, to start a wildfire. You need heat, some sort of spark. You need fuel. Dry vegetation often feeds flames. Houses are really great fuel when they catch. And then you need oxygen, and that's where the Santa Ana winds come in. The Santa Ana winds provide copious amounts of oxygen that can push the flames towards our neighborhoods. They can push the embers towards our neighborhoods, most importantly. So in a wind-driven fire, this is how it happens. The wind comes in, there you have a point of ignition, and the wind blows these embers from that fire up into the air, at great heights. And then those, of course, because of gravity, drop down into other areas and they ignite other vegetation or possibly your home. Embers are pretty amazing. 95% of home ignitions in the Eaton and Palisades fire were from embers. And that's very important because the whole point of making our houses more adept at surviving wildfire comes from how we protect them from embers. And of course, a lot of people do know this fact. But keep in mind a couple things about embers, right? If a tree burns, it will burn for a minute or two. And a tree or chaparral will create ember casts as tall as the tree, or in the case of chaparral, up to 30 feet. Now, if a house catches, it has a copious amount more of fuel available inside of it, and it will create ember casts up to 100 feet, and the structure will burn for over an hour, creating tall, long burning embers. Why is that a problem? Well, let's first look and see exactly what that looks like. Here is some footage from the Palisades, and you can see the hurricane force winds coming in and blowing these embers all over the neighborhood. Now you see every single one of those little sparks is flying around. It is getting inside of whatever is ignitable, and it is embedding itself there. If you can change the way you look at your house and the brush around it, you can just imagine what those embers are going to catch whenever they land and collect in one area. Now, here's some houses, of course, that are burning. You can imagine the types of ember casts those are creating. This goes to the point of exactly how much fuel there is in these structures and why they create such large ember casts that then go and blanket our neighbors' houses. They can blanket structures, they can blanket neighborhoods, they can blanket chaparral up to a mile away whenever you have these wind events like this. Here's the Eaton fires, and you can see there's a hillside on fire, a small vegetation. It's creating all these little embers that are blowing around the streets, and here is a house that has started to catch in its defensible space. But you can imagine these embers have just the best ability to go and find their way into almost any crack and crevice that is available to them. In this case, you have the hillside in the Palisades that is burning. It is above these houses, so it is creating giant flame fronts and giant ember casts that are falling over this neighborhood. And each house has to sustain these ember casts. So you can imagine why this is so important and why that is extremely dangerous. Here's another great video. You can see of the amount of embers that just blanket areas during these, urban fires. Here you have a eucalyptus tree, so forth and so on. So there's a place called the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, and they have a big warehouse in Northern California, and they have dedicated themselves, they're a nonprofit, and they have dedicated themselves to studying why our homes catch fire, what types of materials in our home are most susceptible, how these events in urban conflagrations, how they end up going and spreading house to house, and how they end up taking down our homes. So here you can see they have this great ember machine, and they spread these embers all over this house. And they went ahead and put some vegetation on this house. They built it inside this, big building where they test these things. And you can see vegetative debris ignites in gutters as a result of the ember attack. Now they put on vinyl gutters on one side and metal on the other, just to show you that vinyl gutters, although less expensive to put on, they melt away pretty quick, exposing the wooden siding of the house, right there above your eaves to flame. An asphalt shingle roof is a Class A rated roof, which most people do have these days. It's the best type of roof to have. And burning, pine straw in the valley of the roof, it will not penetrate the roof because of its fire resistance. But you can definitely see how that vegetation stuck on that roof, that dead vegetation, ignites, and it drips down into that nice little corner of that house, igniting the vegetation that's up against the house. The untreated wood shake roof is vulnerable, of course, to spot fires, which they put on this building as well. And so as embers come in and land on a shake roof, they begin to ignite. And once the roof goes, your house is going to go. Dry vegetation is ignited in the indented corner that we saw in the previous slide, and it creates this entire vortex of fire that ends up igniting the side of the house, igniting the siding. And of course, these are the things that we want to avoid. We need to think about our homes into how they will foster fire and foster embers in these big events. Now, the other types of wall siding, there's a left side that's fiber cement, which is only slightly damaged because it's designed to expose to fire. And then the other side you see on the right is vinyl siding. Now vinyl siding is melting, and that exposes the framing of the house to fire. On the left you have the fiber cement siding, which is protecting the house. And then here's an attic gable with 1/8 inch mesh, which that or greater is recommended in all of your vents. But you can see even in the 1/8 inch mesh, there are embers still getting into your attic space. And when these embers get into your attic space, of course, they can ignite. So when I walk around our neighborhood, now that I see the way embers work, I look at houses, I look at our neighbors, I look at the people next to me, and I think, okay, this is a problem. Here in this case, you see pine needles that have collected for a while on this roof and in the gutters. An ember attack hits that, it's going to ignite that. How long your roof can last with that fire on top of it is going to be your question. How long can the side of your, the under portion of your roof last with your gutters on fire? In this case, you have a dead tree that has been left in somebody's backyard with a lot of vegetation that's been unattended to. You have a wooden deck that hasn't been maintained in a while. An ember attack comes in there, it will ignite that tree, it will ignite that deck, and that house will catch fire. Here's another neighbor who has gutters full of debris. And then they also have a great amount of storage materials right underneath their eaves. Guaranteed those storage materials are going to catch. Not even to talk about the wooden fence that is also in front. There's little chance that this house would be able to survive an ember attack. Now, a lot of our houses around Hollywoodland, at least, they have some of this ornate woodwork, which is really beautiful. But if you don't take care of it, you can see there's cracks in all sorts of portions of this wood trim. And those cracks, embers can get into less than an inch of space, even smaller than that. You can see if plants can get behind your wood trim around your garage, embers will get right behind there and ignite the front of your house, and then which will lead to an ignition on the interior of your house. This house in particular has wood siding, it has wood fencing, and the wood fencing goes under the eaves. The wood fencing goes all the way down to the ground. this is all dangerous unless you stay on top of that wood siding in terms of its maintenance. The embers will come to rest there, they will smolder and eventually catch. Or at the very least, that fence will probably catch, which will ignite all the way underneath to the gate, which goes underneath the eaves, which then ignites the house. In this example, you have a wooden fence that goes underneath the eaves, and you have a bougainvillea, which is on top of that fence. As beautiful as it is, if you live with a bougainvillea, you know how much leaf litter that collects. Over time, all those leaves die and regenerate, and it creates a great amount of leaf litter all inside of that bush. And so what happens is all those embers drop inside that bush, and they catch, and then they catch the fence, and the fence catches the roof, and the whole house goes. Same example here. You have another vine right up against the house, right underneath the eaves, that will lead to ignition. Same here. Additionally, in this case, you have those cypress trees, and cypress trees carry a lot of dead material on the inside of them. They are extremely dangerous, often called Roman candles by the fire department. The embers get inside there, and they provide a copious amount of embers once they ignite, and they look just like a Roman candle. They burst into flames, and they expose the side of the house to a lot of radiant heat, and not even to talk about all the embers that blow everywhere. There was one person talking last night about how in the Palisades there was a great big tall cypress tree that caught fire, and the wind was pushing it 45 degrees down, and it ended up breaking the window of a neighbor's house, and it became a flamethrower to the interior of their homes. So these cypress trees, as beautiful as they are and how they're great for privacy, they're extremely dangerous for fire, and they have to be removed. In this example, you have some great trees that are right above this roof line, which in and of itself, the trees aren't the problem, right? The trees largely will survive most fires because the embers fall through the canopies. The problem becomes is that the homeowners don't stay on top of the leaf litter like you see here. You have a lot of leaf litter that is on top of this roof, and it's in the gutters, and it's in the front yard. All of that will ignite. You know, you have to find a way that you can keep all that leaf litter off. In this example, you have a lot of cypress trees creating privacy hedges between these two houses, but they've also put in a wood fence next to wood siding. The trees ignite, the fence ignites, the house ignites. Another example where you have these palm fronds, which are usually have a lot of dead material right underneath wood siding, underneath a wood roof, and you can see the side of those eaves. It hasn't been maintained very well, so it's exposed to embers. I went around and found one house that had a shake roof still, which is not very common, and you can see there's leaf litter all over it. These types of roofs will completely take the house down in minutes. More examples of cypress of vines on the sides of houses. These vines look beautiful and they are lush and green, but if you spend the time and go through and shake these vines or stick your hand behind them, you will find dead material. And that's ultimately the problem of having vines up against your structure, is whenever that dead material collects and those embers get in there, it ignites. And then the side of your house is on fire. Another example of wooden fences under your eaves. An example of wood siding that hasn't been very well taken care of right underneath an entire canopy of a tree, which again, the tree isn't the problem. It's going to be all that leaf litter that's probably in that corner of the fence of the garage right there that's going to ignite, catch the wood siding. Bamboo is a big producer of leaf litter, which will lead to ignition of that entire yard as a result of that. Beautiful cypress trees here, same problem. They're right next to the house. There's vines crawling on their house. It's a real problem. Same problem here. You have cypress trees as privacy hedge right in front of these windows. A vine growing on top of the house. There's definitely leaf litter all contained in that, and you're just basically pouring gasoline in those areas where those vines are connected to your house. Bougainvillea on the side. So here's a great privacy hedge that a lot of people use, and you can see the amount of dead material that regularly drops on it. It would be hard. You could go and clean this out one day, and a week later you will have exactly the same amount of material. So again, the bush isn't the problem. It's the leaf litter that ends up collecting there that ends up being the issue. Here's an example of an entirely, wood-sided house, and This also has those windows in the roof line, which the problem with that is imagine those embers come and hit the side of that house. To an extent, they will drop down and off that house, but there will be some that get caught in that crevice between that wood siding and the roof. And when it catches your siding, that becomes the problem. Then your siding catches just as easily as a wood shake roof would. So if I had a house like this, I would want to replace all of the wood siding with a concrete siding that is not flammable, and also have gutter guards. Here's another privacy hedge. You can see by the close-up picture how much leaf litter that privacy hedge actually has underneath it. Here's a great video I found. So this is from FireSafe Marin, and this is a fire that has ignited on a cypress tree. And I'm going to kind of like shuttle you through it so you don't have to watch the entire thing. So this is probably about 5 minutes in of ignition, and they've called the fire department, but you can see how those trees really create such a huge fire plume, and look at all of the embers that tree is creating. It's raining down on top of that house. Now, that radiant heat is not going to do any good. How long will those materials on your house, especially if it's wood siding or wooden eaves, how long can they last with this direct contact of this flame? Look in the back behind there, and you see those are all cypress trees. And so this fire is going to rapidly spread from tree to tree. And here you have neighbors looking at it. You're now 6 minutes in since the fire started, and you can see it's spreading rapidly to those other trees, right? Now we are 7 minutes, and the entirety of that yard is on fire. It is now almost catching the structure next to it on fire. At 8 minutes, the first fire truck arrives. And so now you have that side yard fully engulfed in flames. It's extreme radiant heat there. The fire truck needs to get set up. They need to start pulling out their hoses. But you can see here, let's see, I just wanted to get this one contrast when it comes up. There's the homeowner pacing back and forth, really upset. But you can see here these firefighters are going to get together a hose. They're going to start putting flame or putting water on the house to hopefully give it more time, right? They want to give it more time to survive. So you have one truck probably full of 4 or 5 firefighters. They're all working as quickly as they can to start getting on this. You are now 9 minutes in, okay? Ignition to 9 minutes. This is what you're looking at with these cypress trees. So they start putting water on the house. They start trying to get it out. And there is one point where you could really there you go. So here's the point I was looking for. The contrast changes on the camera, so you can see all of those cypress trees have ignited, and the side of that house is now ignited. The firemen are now putting a full hose on these trees, but just notice how long it takes them to actually get this fire out. You're now at around 11 to 12 minutes in from ignition, and the side of the house has caught fire, and these trees are still raging with fuel. This is how much fuel is located in those trees. More fire trucks show up. They start to lay down more lines. They start to battle these other fires. And I will take you down here because you can see they're fully attacking these trees now. And every time they spray them, they reignite and they produce more embers. This is the amount of fuel that these cypress trees have inside of them. And so it takes a great deal. It ends up taking 4 trucks and around 15 to 20 firefighters to fully extinguish these trees that got completely engulfed in flames. Even 14, 15 minutes in, these trees are still producing fire despite all of the water that has been thrown at them. The fire ends up getting put out finally at around 17 minutes. So this is a regular day. There's no wind. Firefighters aren't stretched thin. You can dedicate 4 engines to this fire, but you can see, imagine this happening in the Palisades or in the Eaton fires or in your neighborhood, and imagine how difficult it would be to keep this from engulfing the entirety of your home. Okay. Now, how do we fix this? How do we go and take everything we've seen now and how do we help your home, right? There's basically 5 different steps you need to look at. Basic home hardening, right? This is going to be the basics. This is going to be mesh. This is going to be cleaning out leaf litter. This is going to be your vent spaces. And then you're going to have defensible space. You're going to create a space so those embers won't catch the side of your house within 0 to 5 feet. You're going to need upgraded building materials. If you have siding, you're going to want cement siding if you can afford it. If not, then you just need to stay on top of it and paint it all the time and fill in the gaps and repaint it. Maybe extra interventions. Maybe if you do all the basics, you want more security, so you put in a foam system, a fire retardant system, or a sprinkler system, or you have a DIY setup that you can use to set up. And then the last line of defense, which is, you could argue that might be the first line of defense, is going to be community fire hardening. Are your neighbors ready? Are your neighbors' houses going to be a giant source of embers that will then attack your house? We can see in this footage from the Palisades fire afterwards that trees aren't really the problem. Trees are not conducting the spread. They are not igniting and catching our homes. You can see that the trees survived the entire fire because the embers drop through the canopy. They ignite our houses. It's our houses that are vulnerable here. It's our houses that are not resistant to the ember storms that happen in these giant fires. Retrofitting your home, the main areas that need to be reinforced: your roof, siding, eaves, gutters, vents, windows, and attached structures like porches, decks, and fences. And then your defensible space, that's 0 to 5 foot area around your home. So the first thing you want to look at is your roof. Is it a fire-rated roof? Most of them are these days. If your house has had its roof replaced in the last 30 years, then it had to be replaced with a fire-rated roof. That being said, does your fire-rated roof have some vulnerabilities? My house has these S-type Spanish tiles, and those have some vulnerabilities. Birds like to get up in those ends. If you don't put bird stops in or put mortar in between there, they like to get inside there, create a nice little nest, and when the embers get under there, then it creates a nice fire that then your underlayment has to endure. How long can your underlayment endure that? If you have gutters right in front of that, is that all of a sudden going to turn into a fire that ignites the side of your house? Do you have a complicated roof line like this, like that sided house in the previous picture? Does leaf litter collect along that ridge where the windows meet your roof line? If it does, that's a point of ignition. You have to think about that. You have to figure out how you're going to make sure that's clear should a fire come and come through your neighborhood. Gutters. If you don't clean them out regularly, this is what they look like. They become this nice little pocket for embers to ignite a fire. So that becomes a problem. You can put in these gutter guards. Now these are great for letting water in and keeping embers out. You can buy this sets particularly on Amazon. I think I bought a whole set for all of my gutters around my house for around $600 entirely for the materials. There's other things available. You of course have companies do this who charge a lot more, but if you go the DIY method, if you have a pretty normal house, it's going to cost you a couple $100. Siding. If you have siding, replace it. Replace it with a concrete alternative that is non-combustible. That's going to win you a lot of resistance against embers. If you're going to keep your wood siding, then maintain it. Keep it painted. Possibly paint it with a fire-resistant paint, which we'll cover in a few minutes. If you have siding that looks more like this other one with the white trim, consider replacing it. There's embers can get up in those little cracks behind that little trim. They can penetrate that those tiny little cracks in that, and they can smolder and create a fire. And if you have a shake siding like this one, those are just as vulnerable to fire as a shake roof is. The main areas that need to be reinforced: eaves, right? The underneath of your eaves, of course, lead to your attic, and if embers get in there, they will ignite your entire home. You can see here the bad and the good. These are eaves that are exposed, which a lot of us have, and these are eaves which are protected. Once they are protected, once these eaves are protected, when those ember storms hit and they blow embers all up into your wood eaves, then it can ignite your roof line. And again, if your roof line or your attic, or if they get into your attic, if that ignites, then your house will go pretty quickly, because chances of you being able to catch that happening are pretty rare. When you have entire metal sided or metal covered eaves, then they just prevent embers from getting in there. On this example on the left, you can see there's vent holes in that roof line, and each one of those needs to get covered with ember resistant mesh, 1/8 inch or better. I would say 1/16. You also have, if your house was built with a raised foundation, you're going to have these foundation vents, and you can just go and get quick mesh anywhere and get a roll of it, use gloves of course, and cut it and staple it over that vent so that embers will not get into the under portion of your house and expose your framing to fire. You can see the attic vents are a problem from that previous IBHS video. You saw how embers get into there. In the Palisades fire, you could literally see how like one house was burning, creating embers, which then flew into the attic space of the next and then burnt that house down. A lot of the fire spread in the Palisades and Eaton fires happened through the attic spaces. Here's an example of vents that are specifically made to keep embers out. They allow airflow to go in and out, and there's no way that any embers can get into those. You can custom order those. They're not all that expensive. The hardest part about them is if they don't fit perfectly over the existing foundation vent hole that you have, you might have to have your siding repaired to be able to accommodate them. But they are the best you can do in terms of your vent spaces. Windows. Now, we have a problem with this. We have single pane windows in our house. I like them better than any windows I could replace them with, but they are very bad fire protection. Single pane windows exposed to radiant heat crack and break, and then allow embers to get on the inside of your house very quickly. That's why windows are such an important part of this equation. Fire-rated windows are the best. If you're going to replace your windows, don't just buy cheap vinyl ones. Buy something that has a fire rating of 20, 45, or 90 minutes. The frame of them are made to resist embers, to resist heat, and the glass itself is made to be able to resist radiant heat. Retrofit your home, right? Attach structures, porches, decks, and fences. In this case, you have a fence that goes all the way to the front, and you want to keep that fence. You want to keep that door that goes right underneath your eaves. And there are ways you can do that pretty easily. There's concrete wood-like materials that are available to where you can just replace that portion with a metal frame and then put these concrete products on top of it and paint it the same color, and that will look pretty much the same as what you have. Or you can, of course, replace it with a metal fence. Decks, things like that, you need to maintain them. Make sure they're not dried out and cracked from years of negligence. When the decks aren't particularly a problem, but if you don't maintain them, then they do become a big problem towards embers. And all sheds should be at least 10 to 15 feet away from your house. 10 least expensive things you can do to harden your house. Clear vegetation and items that can ignite within 5 feet of your home, right? A lot of us have furniture, we have potted plants, we have benches, all these things right up against our house. It's not that you're not allowed to have that, just realize all of that is ignitable. So when a red flag day comes along, and they happen about 4 times a year, take that lawn furniture and push it out beyond that 5 feet from underneath your house, or bring it inside your house, so that if a fire breaks out, you don't have ignitable materials that are right in that 5-foot range. You have mulch in your garden, replace it with non-combustible alternatives. Rock mulch is available, and there's a lot of products that look a lot like the bark mulch, just as attractive. Install gutter guards or clean your gutters regularly. It's hard to clean your gutters regularly. I've seen even after windstorms, my gutters get completely filled up again. just within a matter of a day or two. So gutter guards will really help you keep those clean if you want to put those in. Seal gaps and cracks in your roofing. This is just caulking. Just go through and look around your house and seal all the gaps and cracks in your siding and your foundation. Cover your foundation vents and attic spaces with 1/8 inch or better mesh. I would recommend 1/16, but 1/8 inch mesh is the minimum requirement. Of course, move flammable items away from structures, right? This ties in storing any items, keeping potted plants, placing furniture within 5 feet. You want to move that out. Trim tree branches overhanging the roof. They should be cut a minimum of 6 feet over the hang of your house. Not that you can't have the trees, but just keep in mind all the leaf litter, and you want to make sure there are no branches that could ignite your house. If the tree were to catch fire. Replace or repair damaged weather stripping. You have weather stripping around your doors, some around your windows, and if it's old and cracked, you have around your garage door, then embers can get in there and they just nest right underneath that weather stripping, and then they end up causing ignition over time. And that becomes a problem. So you want to replace all that damaged weather stripping, and use metal mesh on chimneys. Right, it's required in very high fire hazard severity zones, and you want to use metal mesh around those chimneys. Install hose bibs or fire-resistant hoses at all corners of your house. This is a smart thing to do for the main reason that if a fire breaks out, you have water available to you very quickly. If you just have it in your backyard and all of a sudden you have a tree that caught fire, like in that previous video, you're going to have to disconnect that hose and go over there before the fire department comes. If you have hose bibs around all the corners of your house all ready to go, then you're going to be able to get to that water much more quickly. All of these things are really inexpensive, less than $1,000 you'll spend, and you'll be able to take your house from, you'll be able to give your house a 72% better chance of surviving an ember storm should it happen. This is why our houses are available. I'm sure a lot of people have seen this video before, but you can see CAL FIRE's done a great job here of showing you have the house on the left that has wood siding. It has vegetation right up against the house, has a wood fence. You can see why wood fences under the eaves become a problem. And on the right, you have 5 feet of defensible space. You have a non-ignitable fence, and you have wood siding that is not prone to catching. The difference is simple. On the left, the whole structure burns. On the right, it survives. And it's just these simple things that can be the difference between your home surviving and your home being a total loss. I like this picture. First of all, I like A-frames, but this is a house in our neighborhood, and it has been featured on a podcast about wildfire specifically because it's such a great example of how far some of us have let the urban jungle go. It's a beautiful house. It's really interesting, and I love all the vegetation. The problem is it's a giant fire hazard. You can see the juniper tree, which is just as dangerous as a cypress tree, is right up against their house. All this lush foliage, the bougainvillea on the deck, wooden deck that hasn't been maintained. The framing of the house hasn't been maintained. It just wouldn't survive long in an ember storm. This is the zone Z around your house. It's about 5 feet. And this is what people say needs to be taken care of. It's not that much. Imagine your shoulder width plus 2 feet. There's a new, the whole Zone 0 ordinance that everybody's talking about that will probably go into effect next year. It is for the 0 to 5 feet area. It doesn't include Zone 1. It doesn't even include Zone 2. It's just that 5 feet area. And keeping that clear of flammable materials really, really protects your home in the event of a fire. You can see here a couple of examples. Here's some of that rock mulch I was talking about that looks like bark. Here's a great example of people storing things right up against their house that can be a fire hazard if a fire should break out. Brush clearance. Now keep in mind, this is what we talked about before, trees touching or overhanging structures. You want to remove limbs within 6 feet of any structure, 10 feet from any chimney outlet, right? Trees up to 6 feet or a third of their height. Vines and climbing plants, you want to take them off all structures. Fences, side of your house. I know they're beautiful, but they are a giant fire hazard. Hedges and screen, like vegetation screens between homes. You want to reduce and maintain to a height of no greater than 8 feet. It's just hard to maintain a fire or hard to attack a fire whenever there are greater than that, and remove them if they are within 5 feet of your home. As you saw in the previous slides, just the amount of dead material that they create, that is the big issue. The hedges themselves aren't the issues as much as that material and homeowners' negligence in not removing that material when a fire breaks out. Remove large shrubs under windows and all dead vegetation material from within 100 feet of structures, and then maintain your hillside. We all see that in spring, it grows, or the grasses on the hillsides grow nice and long. You want to always maintain those hillsides by cutting that down to 3 inches. Guidelines for specific plants: Italian cypress, remove them from within 10 feet of any structure. Same with juniper. Bougainvillea, you want to remove from all structures. Wisteria, trumpet vines, creeping fig, any vines, remove them from structures. Palm trees should be free of dead or dying fronds. Now you need a crew to really do that, so you can consider removing them if you can't maintain them. We saw in the Palisades that because of all the dead material that's in the top of those palm fronds, when that ignites to an ember storm, it just then showers for hours embers upon the whole neighborhood. So they become a real fire danger in the event of a fire. And then pines, you want to maintain them all free of dead material. So now that we've seen all that, you can see these videos I saw before. You can look at this little house here, right? This house, the background, of course, that house is fully on fire. We're not quite sure where it started, but this house in the foreground is about to take off. And why? You can see in the corner there's a little fire brewing, and just imagine what the reason is. I could see possibly there's potted plants there, possibly furniture, possibly that wooden fence has caught. And now it's going to lead to exposure over time of that entire side of the house and underneath the eaves. The flames grow, and then it catches that house on fire. This is an apartment building that you can see, or I don't know if it's an apartment building, maybe it's a tall house. The whole side of it has caught due to that 0 to 5 area where something has caught, like hedges or something else like that, and it is exposing the entire side of that to fire now, when it will lead to the entire structure going up. Altadena, another 0 to 5 foot area. They have something flammable in their yard that they left out. The embers have caught that, and now their house is going to go as a result of it. This is why they're saying no ignitable material within that 0 to 5 foot area. Now, why do we have some of these problems with vegetation? Well, the truth is, this is the ecosystem we live in. If you go just outside of Los Angeles to Angeles National Forest, I remember visiting there the first time I moved here. I was like, wow, I'm going to go visit the forest. And this is what I saw. Coming from Oklahoma, I look at this and I say, well, it's a bunch of scrub brush. But it's its own ecosystem, and it's called chaparral. And we live in that area. Our hillsides are a chaparral ecosystem. What we have done over the past 100 years is this. You can see my house on the left in the 1930s, and you can see my house on the right today. The amount of vegetation that human beings have brought into our neighborhoods over the last 100 years has created this problem. On the left, if a fire hit, chances of any of those homes burning are really not that great because it's chaparral, everything around it is defensible. On the right, you have a lot of vegetation that produces leaf litter that drops down on the ground, and that all becomes an abundant fuel source. So for us to claim that these forests have been around forever and the state is coming to rob them, the truth is homeowners have been bringing all these in for the last 100 years, and we have created this problem. Chaparral ecosystem is naturally fire adept. In fact, the chaparral plants propagate through fire ignition every 30 to 50 years. So they are meant to catch fire. And we've all of a sudden put very flammable materials in the middle of this chaparral ecosystem. And now we are seeing why that is a problem. MySafeLA is a great website to go to, and they will do free evaluations of your home for fire. You can go into this web address and you can request it, and they will come to your house and tell you what you need to do to make your house more fire safe. Now here's the additional interventions that I talked about. Sprinklers. I spend a lot of time on this, and there's a lot of websites that talk about this, but not one that really kind of goes over how each one really works, right? Top of the line is this Frontline Wildfire Defense, and they got credited with saving a lot of the homes in Palisades that are expensive. You know, a typical installation on a home is going to be $40,000 to $80,000. It's automatic. It has an app. It's tied to a monitoring office so that if you're not home, they can activate it if a fire is approaching. They have a foam system that that deploys whenever the fire gets too close. So it's really top of the line. It's a great system if you can afford it. If you're going the more DIY method, you can get like a pool pump or something that can hook up to a water feature, or it can hook up to a water tank or a pool if you have it. And you can set up on red flag days, you can set up these sprinklers around your home and then have it all ready. So if a fire breaks out, you just start that engine and it starts watering down your house in the event of a fire breaking out. Fire retardant is an option. A lot of people use that. You can buy these self-applicating canisters and you can go around and spray your yard, and they work. They really do help prevent fire from starting. The environmental efficacy of things like Fostech and some of these other things may be in question, and I would look at that greatly before dousing your yard in fire blocking gel or something like that. However, there's a company called Titratech, and they claim to have a solution that is very environmental friendly. Do your own research, I would say. Titratech is kind of the frontline defense for fire retardant, because they will set up an entire system to spray your yard should a fire break out, so that you can protect your yard from catching fire. I think they have home systems too that they will integrate, so you can get the whole house system through Titratech. I'm not sure about pricing, but they are kind of the equivalent, I would guess, of Frontline or in that ballpark. Here's one that I like. If you don't want to do anything, you can get a giant aluminum wrap for your home. It's kind of a silly idea. You would have to have a crew come out and install it on a red flag day. They do offer solutions where you can just get window covers, and that's something I have considered for our older windows. They attach by magnets. You just throw these on red flag days, and they will protect against ember intrusion, and they will protect against radiant heat. Here's a great example of that product in motion. Now here's a historic cabin, and it got caught up in a big fire that came, and they recorded it. And you can see, I'll just kind of fast forward through it. It ends up surviving amazingly. This foil will protect a structure against radiant heat and keep it from igniting, even though the fire front blew right over it. So it's a pretty cool product. It's not all that crazy expensive, and it might be a good option if you don't want to do the entire, if you don't want to upgrade all the materials of your house. Here's another idea is a fire-resistant paint. It's called Fire Coat, and it can it's kind of like a primer that you can put underneath your paint. And they take you through here a whole application of it. They take one structure, they leave it bare, and then they put this fire coat, and that's the primer. It comes in, and then they light both buildings on fire. And you can see, you're going to be able to see the one on the left, of course, quickly ignites and completely transfers the interior of it, and it ends up collapsing. The one on the right has resistance. The fire goes out, and it just chars the exterior of the building. And you might think, well, now the whole structure is charred. But the truth is, you can scrape it off, and then you can refinish the exterior of that. I'm not sure exactly what your time frame is on that, but it's something to consider if you want to keep, whenever you repaint your house, use this paint, upgrade your paint materials, and just add an extra layer of protection that's going to make your house last longer. A lot of residents come and they say, well, what if it's just smoke damage? I don't want to have to deal with smoke damage. It'd be better if my house just burned. I don't want to do all this. It's expensive. And I get it. Doing all of these things to your home is expensive, and it takes time. Do it little by little. Start with the little things. Start with the basics. Start with the mesh and, on the vents and your gutters. And then do little by little after that. Start taking out the things and replace them with something. Do your research. There are companies that do great fire-wise landscaping around your house. Because remember, there is trauma in losing everything. I talked to a lot of people who lost their homes in the Palisades fire, and they are looking at 2 to 5 years of having to deal with the headache of rebuilding their lives and their home. And if you have a family and you have kids, that's just even more. You're taking people away from their schools, you're taking the kids away from their life, and it's traumatic. It perhaps outweighs any other argument, and it is an argument for doing everything we can to protect the homes that we have and the neighborhoods that we have. So insurance companies, a lot of people, we did at the event had an insurance expert, and a lot of people want to look at insurance companies and complain that they are disappearing from California, they just want bigger profits. But the truth is, insurance companies have had some big hits in the years. They had the Woolsey fire, they had the Tubbs fire, they had the Camp fire. They have had to come in and completely replace neighborhoods really quickly. They had the Palisades fire and the Eaton fires. And this is extraordinarily expensive. And the reason they have to go and replace all these homes is because most of these homes are catching fire through embers. If you can go from completely non-protected to 72% chance of not igniting during an ember storm just by installing ember-resistant vents and creating defensible space in that 0 to 5 foot area, then we have to accept the fact that we have some responsibility here. Insurance companies are our great partners on our properties. They're the ones who allow us to get a loan to buy a house. They're the ones that protect the investment, all the money that we're putting in. And if they're leaving, it's not necessarily because they want giant profits. It's because maybe they want some profit, and they expect that homeowners need to assume some of the responsibility for protecting their homes. It can't just be insurance companies, and it can't just be the fire department and government who is responsible for protecting our homes. If we decide to live with all this vegetation around our house, we are going to have to accept some of the responsibility, a great amount of the responsibility towards protecting our homes against ember storms and wildfire. So what do we expect from firefighters, right? A lot of times you can hear people saying, well, I want to have these plants and I want to have it all in the front. I'm not going to take it out. I'm not taking out that cypress tree. Well, just give that a second thought when you think about firefighters, because these people have dedicated their lives, not for money, because they want to be a firefighter. They want to come in and help people. They want to come in and protect our homes. They get depressed if, like in the Palisades, there were a lot of firefighters who were coming out and were extremely depressed because they had no power over this huge urban fire, right? So we need to help protect our firefighters, in creating that defensible space and protecting our homes. It helps them. They only have so many resources that they could dedicate towards a fire. And if we take the responsibility of protecting them, then they're going to be able to use those resources to better protect the entire neighborhood and not just a single structure. Because what happens is when you have multiple structure ignitions in these giant ember storms, then they have no choice except to go from fire suppression and protecting structures to go into life-saving mode. Here we have Chief Maroney in the PBS documentary I have on our website. He says, could I have used more engines and more firefighters in the Palisades fire? Absolutely. Would it have made a difference? I don't believe so. And when you see that footage of all those embers, you can start to understand why. It takes about, forward to this one. It takes about 4 engines and 15 firefighters to fight a single home structural fire. So in these events where you have multiple homes on fire, say 10 homes are on fire in a neighborhood, you need 150 firefighters, right? And you need 40 engines. I know in Hollywoodland, that's almost an impossible scenario to be able to get 40 engines up into our neighborhood. So you think maybe these helicopters can help in these instances, and they can. We have one of the most advanced firefighting agencies in the entire world. They have these helicopters that go and can drop fire retardant, they can drop water on top of these fires, and they can do it with a single pilot even at night. And that's pretty incredible. The problem is if the winds are so great that they can't fly, which that happened in the Palisades, or if the fire retardant the fire is so hot that the fire retardant or is not even hitting the ground, or the wind is blowing the fire retardant and dispersing it so much it doesn't make a difference on the heart of a fire it's trying to put out, or if the water evaporates before it hits the ground, that is a factor. And there's nothing that these pilots can do about that. So they have a limited capacity of being able to deal physically with these huge fires. So for our neighborhoods to survive, we really have to do this as a neighborhood. It's kind of the only choice, and here's the proof why. Waldo Canyon summary. So in 2012, there was a fire in Colorado called the Walden Canyon Fire, and it was 4 miles northwest of Colorado Springs. And what had happened before this fire broke out is there was a community called Cedar Heights, and they had already done extensive proactive mitigation for fires in their neighborhood. They spent around $300,000 to do that. So once this fire tore through all these different neighborhoods, the Cedar Heights community had an 82% save rate, and there became an opportunity to do an entire study as to how fire mitigation really helps protect neighborhoods in these events, and why community involvement in wildfire protection is so important. $300,000 was spent on mitigation, but because of the 82% save rate, $77 million in losses were avoided. That you just can't even argue with that. It's no wonder insurance companies don't want to insure our neighborhoods if we are not going to do anything. But to be successful, pre-fire mitigation must be conducted at the individual and community levels. It has to be coordinated amongst all our neighbors. Wildfires will continue to occur in homes and communities in wildfire-prone areas. If they're not prepared, they will burn. So here is a scenario, right? And I'm going to do this in Hollywoodland because that's where I live. Let's take you through what might happen. Season late October. There hasn't been any rain since, let's say, May. It's been a hot summer. We've had 100-mile or 100-degree days. We had a couple weeks that just went 100 degrees. And now all of a sudden it's late October and all this vegetation is dried out. It's overgrown from a couple years of rain. And you have Santa Ana wind event come in, 35 to 55 mile per hour gusts from the north-northeast, south-southwest. Imagine that you have an ignition source, an abandoned warming fire, right? From an individual who's been camping in Griffith Park, which happens all the time. And they've abandoned it, they moved on, maybe they got pushed out and nobody checked to see if there was a fire, and the warming fire's there. Well, these winds come along and they create an ignition location. And let's say it's in Upper Brush Canyon, right? Which you can see from the map where that is. Griffith Park Ridgeline, and that wind is blowing from the north-northeast to the southwest. Well, at 5 minutes in, imagine this fire started, a passerby sees it and calls 911. Let's consider that lucky. If that's 2 o'clock in the morning, let's just say it's 2 o'clock in the morning, that's pretty lucky that somebody sees it, but let's say, okay, it happens, they call a 911. The wind's blowing, a small column quickly turns horizontal from wind shear, which happens a lot in these high wind events. You get the fire that all of a sudden starts laying down and catching vegetation on fire. And the winds push the fire downslope towards Brush Canyon, which is the direction of the wind, and trail, and the Bronson Caves area. Now, if you've been there, you can see the amount of vegetation that would catch pretty quickly. 20 minutes in, right, you got fire agencies starting to move towards that area. Hopefully they're on scene by then, but by then the fire has moved rapidly downslope towards Canyon Drive. You have a neighborhood there. People are starting to get worried. You have embers. Remember those 30-foot ember casts from Chaparral? Those are going to spread as far as a half mile to a mile. The circle is only a half mile, so you can see how far that is from the ignition source, and that is the exposed area to embers at this point. So embers cross the ridge towards Lake Hollywood Reservoir because of that distance and the wind, and you have key pockets that ignite. You're going to start getting dry vegetation around the Lake Hollywood trails, which we all seen is overgrown, steep canyons feeding downward draft winds towards Beechwood. we've seen all of that. There's plenty of vegetation to catch. 45 minutes in, the fire reaches the ridgelines above Beechwood West and Deronda Drive, and ember casts blankets the canyon neighborhoods. Right now, we're going to start getting a lot of embers 45 minutes in from those fires as the fire agencies try to battle it. So you're going to have a lot of engines up there trying to battle those fires. If they don't get it, what starts to happen are the brush-lined driveways and the wood shingle roofs start catching. Overgrown canyons and ornamental vegetation possibly start catching. 45 minutes in, if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, have they alerted everybody? Are they starting to move people out? That's the question. 45 minutes doesn't seem like a whole lot of time. Are you even awake yet? Do you even know this fire has started? Do you know that you're in a dangerous area? The homes most vulnerable to ignition at this point will be any home without ember-resistant screening. All of those embers are going to get into your attic spaces and they might start catching. Homes with attached wooden structures, right? Fences, anything like that. Italian cypresses are all going to go and they will start to ignite homes. Juniper trees, things like that. Homes with debris-filled gutters. You can see from the previous pictures, we have those all around. Those are going to start igniting. The minute you get house ignitions, the fire department is now going to have to respond to those, right? 90 minutes in, you get structure ignitions. Multiple simultaneous structure fires begin from embers. Have they even issued an evacuation order at this point? You're 90 minutes in. Are neighbors waking up? Are they starting to panic? What's happening? You got narrow roads, you got parked cars and steep terrain, which slows engine access. I've seen full ladder trucks come up to my street before, and it's hard. It's really hard. Our neighborhoods are challenged by super narrow streets, especially in the Knolls and the Dell and Hollywoodland. A wind-driven ember storm condition develops, right? Fencing sheds and garages burn, heat plume is trapped against the canyon slopes, increasing radiant heat to the neighborhood, which then increases the possibility for ignition, especially on wooden structures. 2 to 4 hours is peak spread. The fire spans out, and it pushes toward the south, the Hollywoodland entrance, the Beechwood Market, and the flats below. It pushes out towards Lake Hollywood Drive corridor and the Wonder View, the Hollywood Reservoir neighborhoods, and it's going to start catching in all these places. It's going to go to the South Ridge towards the Hollywood sign. It'll threaten the Hollywood Knolls, outpost in Cahuenga Pass, and the ember cast will start igniting vegetation in those areas. When you have your entire fire agencies now dedicated in this, if they don't have helicopters up, if they can't do these water drops, this will spread rapidly house to house unless we have neighborhoods that have already done pre-fire mitigation. Factors. Steep canyons, of course, fuel wind, right? Because the wind pushes them down, it acts as a funnel and accelerates fire downhill. Old vegetation mixes, chaparral and eucalyptus, juniper and Italian cypress, they create a lot of embers, as you saw from that video before. Older homes with combustible features, they have increased ember vulnerability. We talked about that with all the raised foundations, with the wooden decks, with wooden windows. Narrow lanes and visibility issues become slower for response and evacuation. The realities for evacuations is maybe if you are awake, you will evacuate early. Maybe you're ready. Maybe you have all the stuff packed in your car that you want. Most of what I saw is once people see that they're going to have to be evacuated, they start thinking only at that point what it is they want to start packing their car for before they leave. Late evacuees face road choke points at Beechwood Drive, Ledgewood Drive, Belden, Woodshire, Holly Ridge, and Cahuenga Pass. We saw that during the Sunset Fire. That was during the middle of the day. People were more or less ready, and residents reported 40 plus minutes to get out of the neighborhood. So imagine you are evacuating. This is footage from the campfire from up in Paradise, California. And these are people who are evacuating by foot. You can see everything's on fire, and you can see these giant wind, gusts of embers that pass by them as they're just trying to walk out. Now you might look at this and assume this is middle of the night, but this is actually 10 o'clock in the morning. This is from the amount of smoke that is created, so you can just imagine what it must be like to breathe that. How long does it take you to get out? Do you have a mask that can protect you against that smoke? or are you breathing that in? Can you walk that far in these types of conditions? The amount of radiant heat that comes from the vegetation that's going to be burning around you, that comes from the homes that are on fire, it will be excessive. I remember helping my boss back in 1996 protect his shake roof against an encroaching fire. And it was all the way, he was already at the beach, but it was across PCH, and I could feel the radiant heat coming from that fire. So the radiant heat is something a lot of people don't think about because you can't feel that when you watch these videos. Maybe you're lucky. Maybe you get in a car and you can get out via your car. This is what your visibility is going to look like. This is what you're going to see. This radiant heat will heat up that glass. You can see the wind is still going to be blowing embers all over your car. Do you have leaves stuck in the grill of your car? Are those going to ignite? Are there parts of your car that are going to ignite? People stuck in the Paradise Fire trying to evacuate said that the glass on their cars was extremely hot. Your air conditioning can't keep up to keep the cabin cool. The glass gets super hot and it's hot to the touch. It is a completely miserable experience, and then you get caught in a complete stop of traffic trying to get out. You can imagine how people react. They panic. They start yelling. Maybe they start sideswiping each other. It's hard. You know, it's really difficult to imagine what it would be like to try and get out of our neighborhood, but this footage might give you some idea of what it would feel like. Emergency preparation is all about what you do before an emergency, and that was a new concept for me and my wife when it came to the Sunset Fire, because we spent the whole day talking about whether or not we should move or we should leave before something might happen, and we didn't really talk about, well, what do we want to take? Well, how are we going to tell the insurance company if our house burns down, like what it is we have? A lot of people, survivors of the Palisades Fire, say the insurance companies are making them prove that they had all of these possessions that they say they did. And they want pictures of every drawer in your house. So prepare beforehand. Do that now. Prepare all the things you need. So if an emergency, whether it be a fire or an earthquake or something else, that you're ready. You know, we live in an area where sudden disasters can happen. Prepare yourself now so you don't have to panic when the day comes. Because whenever that emergency order comes, you're really going to be thinking about all those things you want to bring with you. And you're going to forget a lot of the most important things, because that's what happens. You don't have the right mind whenever you are leaving an area fearing for your life. And even if you have time, imagine that scenario. It's 3 o'clock in the morning and you run out and you find the front of your house is on fire. You can basically run out with your family, get in your car and escape, much less bring anything else with you. So prepare yourself. Create an emergency plan. How are you going to communicate? Cell towers will probably be out. If it's during the day and you guys are separated, how do you communicate? How are you going to get information to each other that you're safe? Prepare a go bag. Make sure that's ready at all times. What you put on there can be very personal. Make sure and pack things so you can breathe if it's a fire, because walking through those evacuation routes, whenever there's that amount of toxins in the air, can be really difficult. Keep your vehicle fuel or battery at half capacity or better. Now this is an important one because the line for gas stations out of the Palisades Fire when people were evacuating was huge, and it was blocking the evacuation route. Don't leave barely any gas in your car. Make sure you have enough so that you can get out if an emergency happens. Prepare your property. Imagine you've done all those things that we talked about, and it's the day of Red Flag Day. Prepare your property. Remove that leaf litter. Maybe it's built up a little bit. Remove it. Blow it off with your blower. Make sure those tree limbs are cut if you miss them, right? Remove all your flammable materials. This is the time to move that patio furniture. Anything you have in that 0 to 5 area that could catch fire, move it out of there. Even if you move it to 6 feet out, just move it away so that it doesn't become an ignition source for your house. Make sure your fireproof mesh is installed on your foundation and attic fence. It's not too late. You can go get a roll from Home Depot when a red flag day is predicted. You can get some mesh cutters and some gloves, and you can just staple it right over your vent if you need to. But you can do that pretty quickly. If you have any of those other interventions, now's the time to pull them out. If it's DIY pool pump or fire sprinkler system, just do it. Set it up on the red flag days. There's 4 a year. It's not going to be that big a deal. It takes about 30 minutes. Set it up. So all you have to do is pull that string and evacuate, and it will water your house and help you. Sign up for emergency alerts so that you know when an emergency is happening. It will alert your phone. Sign up for red flag day alerts so you know when those are predicted. Download the Watch Duty app, which is pretty great at telling you when a fire breaks out. It's not always going to be 100%, so rely on your instincts, right? Local weather and wind information. Are there local weather stations in your area? Well, a lot of neighbors have these in their yard, and you can subscribe to their feed. And if they're on the ridge lines, and they can be a great source of information of wind direction. So imagine you see a fire has broken out and it hasn't been reported, and you know the wind is coming at you at 55 miles per hour because of that weather station. That's going to give you great information as to where your evacuation route is going to be. Consider traffic backups and congestion, and if possible, leave before an evacuation is ordered. It's easier. You're going to feel much better if you are able to do that. Be responsible to yourself and your neighbors, right? Leave before evacuation orders are in place, and be ready ahead of time with your home hardening, defensible space, and extra interventions. This is a basic responsibility you have to yourself and to your neighbors and to the firemen that are going to come and try and protect your homes. Be ready on red flag days to evacuate. Don't wait. Know those local conditions and know your routes. Give yourself enough time. Be prepared. Have the bins of all the things that you want to take with you ready on those red flag days. Here's the campfire. This is the one we've been talking about in Paradise. We've all heard about it because the amount of people that died trying to evacuate, right? The problem was it took less than 2 hours from ignition for the fire to spread 7.5 miles away. And then it took an hour more than that for the entire town to be engulfed. The campfire's peak growth rate was about 1 football field per second. So if you think about how fast that goes, it's going to be a lot faster than you can think about. If it's spreading that quickly and you take 30 minutes to pack your car, it's possible you have waited too long. Here's a timeline of spread. You can see this is when the fire starts, in a vegetation fire, and it starts spotting. By an hour after the initial ignition, Paradise is catching. 2 hours in, there's a lot of structure ignitions that are happening in Paradise, and that just compounds. Everybody tries to leave. By the time it's 10 o'clock, the sky is black and the entire town is engulfed in flames. So it does not take long. It takes a lot less than you think. We think, oh, we're going to be able to do this. You think rationally, but the truth is you don't have as much time as you think. And how well do you operate in an extreme environment like this? We are here to help. We are the Fire Safe Council, so we all... all of us on the Fire Safe Council dedicate our time. We are an all-volunteer organization, and we do this because we have done it to our houses, and we want to share this information with you. We have done a lot of the research. We go to meetings. We talk to people about this. Use this as a resource because that's why we're here. We have a brand new website, HollywoodHillsFireSafeCouncil.org. Check it out. See what you think about it, because it has all the information you might need if you have questions, if you have projects, if you don't know how to start your home hardening project or where to start on your property. Reach out to us. We're here to help. We want you to reach out, and we want this information to be valuable to you so that our communities can really help mitigate fire for the future. All right, thank you.